Welcome back to AI for the Humanities. I'm Megan McInnes-Dominguez, Associate Professor of Spanish at the University of Delaware. On this channel, I explore how generative AI intersects with literature, culture, language, and ethics, and how a humanistic lens can shape the way these tools are used in education. Today, I'm thrilled to reintroduce Emilia Cortale, a research assistant in our AI for the Humanities internship and a senior majoring in Spanish studies with minors in advertising and human development and family sciences. Emilia was my student in my course on Plácido, and her astute interpretations also appeared in my episode on creative AI. In today's episode, Emilia will take a deeper look at Llama 3.3, Meta's open source large language model. She will demonstrate its strengths and limitations by analyzing Plácido's La Flor de la Caña, showing where an LLM can help students access themes and structures, and where it can stumble in dialect, historical nuance, and the politics beneath romantic surface readings. She will also address hallucinations, misattribution, and the model's current inability to handle non-textual media relevant to the humanities, such as images, sheet music, and video. Finally, she will widen the lens to ethics, discussing the environmental costs of compute and cooling, and the educational stakes when tools that scaffold learning can also tempt students to outsource it. Viewers will come away with practical guardrails, prompt documentation, cross-checking with primary sources, dialect, variety awareness, and a clear vocabulary for discussing authorship, bias, and sustainability in the classroom.
Hello, and welcome back to AI for the Humanities. In case you haven't seen my previous video, my name is Emilia Cortale, and I am a research assistant studying AI under Professor Megan McInnes-Dominguez here at the University of Delaware. I am a rising senior Spanish studies major with a double minor in advertising and human development and family sciences. In this video, I am going to further discuss and demonstrate the abilities, limitations, and ethical implications of the use of my assigned tool, Llama 3.3. To summarize what I talked about in my last video, Llama 3.3 is the most recent and efficient large language model created by Meta. Llama 3.3 is an open-source AI model and is highly efficient considering its size and level of complexity. Its accessible nature and cost-effectiveness leaves room for further exploration and development by professionals and amongst the AI community. That being said, let's jump right into my demonstration. As a Spanish studies major, I've had to read a lot of texts for my class, from historical documents to contemporary works and even artistic compositions. But in my personal opinion, the most difficult text to understand in a foreign language would have to be poetry or short stories. There's so many nuances, culturally, historically. There's just a lot of context that goes behind a poem or some sort of, artistic story, because you're not just translating, words. There's meaning behind it, of course. And so because of this, I'm going to ask Llama 3.3 to analyze one of my favorite poems that I have read in a class. This particular piece was written by Plácido, who was a 19th century poet from Cuba, and it is called La Flor de la Caña, which translates to the sugarcane flower. This poem is written in the perspective of a slave owner who has fallen in love with a woman who works in the fields. It follows their secret love affair, and it details the man's feelings for his beloved, and her name is Idalia. It's a very beautiful love poem. Follows the key characteristics of, the Romanticismo era of literature and art. So I have the poem and a couple questions already typed out, so I'm just going to copy and paste it. It is quite a long prompt, so we'll see how long it takes for Llama 3.3 to process it. Again, because I only have a MacBook as my personal device, I access Llama 3.3 through Hugging Chat, which is one of the different websites or applications that you can use online, because actually downloading Llama 3.3 to my device is impossible. It's just too small, and you know, that's fine. Like, there are video games that are too big for this computer, so that's totally fine. If you have a humongous PC, feel free to download Llama 3.3 or a similar generative AI tool, but it works pretty much the same with an application like Hugging Chat. So I'm just going to copy and paste everything. So I'm going to scroll to the top. I'm going to say, hello, can you read this poem and answer the questions I've provided you? I'm just going to add please. Can you please read this poem? Anyways, so here are my questions. What is the central theme or the main idea of this poem? Who are the main characters? The tone. I'm going to ask about structure and the rhyming scheme. The historical and cultural context that might influence the poem's meaning. And then identify and explain the uses of figurative language in the poem. So a lot of different questions, a lot for it to work with and to analyze. So I'm going to ask Llama 3.3 first, and then I'm going to give my own feedback based on what I know about the poem, what I've learned in class and outside of class, because I did this poem for a research paper. So here it is. It's a lot. So this might take a little bit of time for Llama 3.3 to generate an output, but here it is, going little by little, the little generative AI tool that could. That's really impressive that it's generating so fast. I was originally planning on like setting a timer and then pausing the video. Oh, I did not know that. Oh, okay. So it seems that something went wrong. I think our prompt might have been a little too big. Another factor might just be my Wi-Fi. I'm recording this from my apartment, and my apartment is infamous amongst my friend groups for having not great Wi-Fi. So, okay. Awesome. Little trial and error. So it provided, so how many questions I asked? I asked 6 questions. It got stuck on the 5th question. So let's see what it works with right now. So let's just see. I can provide a detailed analysis of the poem La Flor de la Caña by Gabriel de la Concepción Valdés or Plácido. The central theme of the poem is the speaker's love and admiration for the woman. Yes. The flower of the cane. Okay, that is the direct translation. It is also the sugar cane flower. The poem explores the speaker's emotions, thoughts, and actions. It tries to win the woman's heart. This is correct. The main characters in the poem are the speaker and the woman he loves. The AI was able to, it definitely read the poem because it's correct so far. There's in each, what's it called, stanza, at the end of each stanza, it usually ends. There's no spaces here for some reason. It didn't copy and paste right, but it says La Flor de la Caña, and that refers to the woman. And her name is Idalia, that says in the last stanza right here. Romantic and passionate individual who's deeply in love with the woman, while the woman is portrayed as being beautiful, modest, and kind. Yeah, that's true. That is true. Tone is romantic, passionate, and intimate, in a sincere and heartfelt manner, conveying his deep love and admiration for the woman. Poem consists of 16 stanzas, with consistent rhyming scheme and meter. A, B, B, C, C, D, D. Yeah, okay. Octosyllabic, 8 syllables per line. That is correct. And right now it got stuck on the historical and cultural context. So I'm just going to copy and paste these last 2. Can you provide the answers to these 2 questions about the poem? And I'm just going to say the poem. I'm not going to specify which one because we're currently talking about La Flor de la Caña. So let's see. It's loading. So, just to catch you up to speed, Llama 3.3 had a little bit of trouble generating the responses to my last two questions. It took about a minute for it to start, producing an answer. It answered the fifth question and it moved on to the sixth question, and something went wrong again. So that's fine. I'm just going to reload the site and see where it left off. I think that's all I'm going to ask of it today, just so this video is not too long. But, okay, the historical and cultural context. It takes place during 19th century Cuba, which is correct. During this time, it was a Spanish colony in the surge of sugar production, influx of African slaves. This is all correct. Cultural context, imagery, and symbolism related to sugarcane, which is a major crop in Cuba. This is true. The poem's use of African and indigenous imagery, such as the veguera, which is a term for a woman of African descent. Cultural diversity of Cuba during this period. The poem's reference to Semana Santa. Yes, okay, Catholic imagery. This is pretty good. I'm quite impressed with the accuracy of Llama 3.3, especially because, this poem isn't super well known. It's not the most popular poem in Latin American literature. I should know, because when I was doing my research paper for it, it was a little bit difficult to find resources and sources to cite for it, but that is very impressive in my opinion. The accuracy that Llama 3.3 has given me so far. Let's move on to the figurative language before I give some more feedback. For as much as it could. Rich and figurative language adds to the beauty, depth, and meaning. The comparison of the woman to the flor de la caña. Yes, delicate, beautiful, and precious. Her hair. Yes, blonde threads that wander in the mercy breeze. Okay, so I'm not sure if Llama 3.3 was going to touch on it, but it did a little bit, but not super. It wasn't super clear in my opinion, but a big part of this poem is that, yes, it is about a secret. It's about a forbidden love of this man and this woman who, is a slave. She's from African descent. It's also a call for change for the treatment of slaves and the social classes, the social divide that was going on in Cuba at this time. Something else that's important to note that I wish it touched on in the historical or cultural context, but I understand that it didn't. The author of La Flor de la Caña was mixed race, and so a lot of his identity was represented in his works, and especially that of Idalia, who is a woman of African descent, but at one part in the poem, it says her hair is blonde, and so just the woman in general, how she is, of African descent, but she is also likely mixed race, because it talks about her tan skin and her blonde hair. But overall, quite impressive. A little bit upsetting of how the application sort of crashed on us. Could have been my Wi-Fi, could have been because it was such a long prompt, a lot to read, a lot to memorize. But not memorize, analyze, sorry. But yeah, I'm quite pleased with that. I think that was a semi-successful demonstration of how AI can be used to assist in the study of the humanities. So I'm not taking any more literature classes for my degree, but if I was, I would probably use Llama 3.3 to help me out. I just want to jump real quick into the limitations of using AI for the humanities. I talked about it in my demonstration, of course, but I gave Llama 3.3 the title of the poem, the author of the poem, and the actual poem itself. I could have just given it the title of the poem instead of the entire poem in one prompt. However, in my experiences of using AI inside the classroom, it's best to give it as much information as possible in order to receive the most accurate output. This sounds obvious, but there have been some examples in cases in my academic career where I've used generative AI to analyze Latin American literature with the permission of the professor, of course, and the tool I was using was not giving me accurate results. There were instances where the tool had confused the short story or the poem I gave them with something else of a similar title. But in most cases, the tool was just making stuff up. It was just making up anything, and it didn't make sense. It would give me a story, and I'm like, oh, that's nothing like what I had just read. Okay. This is an interesting result of AI. It's called a hallucination, which is just incorrect or misleading outputs given from an AI assistant. There are a few factors that could cause a tool to hallucinate. Most of the time, it's having insufficient or biased data training on the subject that you're asking about, and so that leads to incorrect assumptions. There are other limitations that become apparent when using Llama 3.3 and generative AI in general. When it comes to analyzing literature or art, AI has the tendency to lack the nuances and cultural contexts and understandings in certain circumstances. Social, historical, cultural contexts are just some factors that AI might struggle to grasp at this time. In my demonstration, Llama 3.3 did a pretty decent job. It hit most of the important bullet points that I was looking for, that we had talked about in my class. But overall, in its knowledge of the humanities domains, like art or philosophy, its knowledge is sometimes outdated or just limited in comparison to other subject matters. Another restriction of Llama 3.3 specifically is that it is unable to read images. At the time that this video is coming out, or the time it's being filmed, 100%. AI is developing so fast. Maybe when this comes out, this will change. But right now, when I'm filming this, Llama 3.3 is not able to analyze any non-textual sources. So this could be videos, images, sheet music. These forms of media are prevalent in the humanities field. And right now, Llama 3.3 doesn't have the ability to access this side of the humanities, which is a little bit sad, but hopefully this changes in the future, because my original idea for this project and these demonstrations was to have AI help me musically, analyzing musical compositions and arrangements for different instruments, because I like music, and so I thought it would be a fun idea. But it was very difficult when I learned that Llama 3.3 can't read sheet music. And I was like asking it like, okay, so how can you help me? And it's trying to like give me back ways to help where I could type the sheet music like using my keyboard, which is so long and tedious. And so I'm like, you know what, forget it. I'm just going to talk about literature. I like that too. While Llama 3.3 supports other languages, sorry, crazy transition. It supports 7 other languages in addition to English. There still might be some difficulty in analyzing multicultural texts, as each language has different dialects and meanings for certain words depending on where the language is being spoken, along with cultural context that might be challenging for AI to comprehend. Overall, it is critical to evaluate Llama 3.3 and any other generative AI tools output before drawing conclusions. Generative AI is not a replacement for human critical thinking and analysis, but rather a tool that can assist us in a myriad of ways. It's good to consult other sources from reputable databases instead of trusting the first response you get from an AI assistant. Just something to keep in mind. Okay, so now that we've touched on what Llama 3.3 can and cannot do that well, I wanted to talk about the ethics of using Llama 3.3 or any other generative AI model in that case. So, as we all know, training and using any AI model requires a significant amount of computational resources, and all of those need energy. Unfortunately, a majority of this energy usually comes from the burning of fossil fuels. And while AI is a very useful tool that has made our lives so much more convenient, it really does come at a price. To give you an idea just how much energy generative AI requires, one ChatGPT search uses about 10 times the electricity compared to a typical Google search. And this is primarily because generative AI tools need to process large amounts of data and then feed back a response to the user in a conversational manner, as opposed to Google, who is just providing a bunch of different links that the users will explore on their own free will to find their answer. And so training and running generative AI primarily uses water and electricity as energy sources. Water is not only used as a source of power, so kind of like hydropower, but it also functions as a coolant to prevent overheating of the machinery. The way that AI works is relatively simple. After typing in a prompt into the chat, it gets processed by the AI assistant, and data is retrieved from a data center, which is what it sounds like. It's a very large building. It's filled with computers and resources. And then a response is sent back. This sounds very straightforward, but similar to how our smaller and personal devices can heat up when we use them too often, sometimes when we have too many tabs open, the same thing happens to these supercomputers and the servers that are kept within these data centers. And so to prevent the combat, to prevent the heat generated by those devices, these supercenters are filled with large fans that run in order to keep the technology cool and keep everything functioning properly. Currently, the United States is home to the most amount of data centers compared to any other country. I forgot the specific number, but it is quite a lot. It was around 5,000 back in 2015, and that's 10 years ago. So with the growth of technology and digital media and AI, it could be double, it could be more. I'm not 100% sure. But another way that AI has contributed to our planet's resources also comes from its physical production. So the microchips that power AI technologies are created from mining rare elements that often are retrieved from the earth in a manner that is environmentally disruptive and destructive. Meta AI, which is the parent company of Llama 3.3, claimed that they're managing their environmental footprint by utilizing more renewable energy sources, such as using wind as an energy source and the use of solar panels. to balance out the energy that their technology is consuming. The company claimed that they plan on restoring more water than they consume by the year 2030. Hopefully, Meta AI will uphold their promises of sustainability, and that this will inspire other companies to run and develop their technologies responsibly. But switching to renewable energy sources, developing energy efficient technologies, and exploring the use of more sustainable materials in the production of new tech are just a few possible strategies to help mitigate the environmental impact of generative AI. And while there is a lot of evidence that has shown the negative effects of, the recent boom of AI, there is a bright side in which the use of AI can positively impact our environment. There are multiple different organizations across the world that are utilizing the power of artificial intelligence that our planet can benefit from. I know there's organizations in Norway and South Korea, but from tracking and mitigating climate prediction patterns and threats against the environment to optimizing resource management to reduce waste, it is possible to use AI for the good of our planet. And so while it has caused a lot of concern from an environmental standpoint, it is possible to sort of, calm down a little bit, and we can use it to help us, which is good. Moving on, another ethical concern of mine regarding the implications of generative AI and its accessibility is the role that it plays in education, and specifically in secondary education. Me personally, I first began to use generative AI for assistance with assignments or anything this past fall. And I am very grateful that I did not have access to this technology earlier on in my education. Just a reminder, I'm a junior right now, so my fifth semester in college. For students who have access to a personal electronic device and to the internet, it is very easy to misuse AI in ways that violate its intended purpose. This isn't me saying that there is no ethical way to use AI in the classroom. There are a number of professors and teachers that give students permission and sometimes encourage students to use AI for educational purposes. But I totally believe that AI is an incredible tool that can really assist students with a variety of different academic projects. However, the temptation to resort to AI for entire assignments and doing this, on a regular day-to-day basis is very apparent in our society. I can speak for myself on my college campus. As a college student, it's not uncommon to hear a fellow student complaining that, like, oh, I have no time, or I have no idea how to complete this assignment, and I'm just going to chat GPT it. I'm going to be very honest. I am guilty of doing this, of using ChatGPT to complete an entire assignment. At one point, I took a class and the topic was not interesting to me. It wasn't relevant, or I didn't think it was useful for my field. And, I didn't feel engaged in the class. I didn't have a relationship with the professor. I also work part-time, and so that takes up a lot of my time to do homework. And all these reasons combined, it was very easy for me to turn to AI for help throughout the entire process of completing this assignment. And I would have rather dealt with the guilt of quote-unquote cheating, which it is, in my opinion, than to stay up late at night after a long day of going to work and going to class. And so it's a very real scenario that many college students face. And it's not ideal, but it is common. And of course, students have different opinions of, whether or not it feels correct, or some people will use ChatGPT and, that's it. Like, no worries, boom, my assignment's done. That's all I care about. But, some people, do feel more guilty about that, and I can't really speak on behalf of other people. But after taking the time to research this semester and really think about the ethics behind the use of AI through this internship, I'm definitely more mindful about how I use generative AI than I used to be. Before I open a new tab and click on Llama 3.3 or a similar tool, I really take a minute and I ask myself, can I find out this information through another source, like a Google search or by talking to a friend? And if not, if I can't think of any way and I have to ask a generative AI tool, I think about how I can phrase this prompt so that I can get the most accurate results and prevent an instance where I'm sending multiple prompts back and forth with AI. Because of course, the more prompts you send or the higher the word count, that is, impacting our environment. Let's see. Yeah, with the back and forth trying to refine the output that I originally received, I'll do my best to sort of condense it and make it complete, not too long, but it gives me enough information to go off of. This research opportunity has not only given me a lot of time to learn about the rapid development of AI, but also the time to reflect about how the technology impacts our society. I remember my parents telling me how they couldn't imagine growing up and going to school during the digital age with like full access to the internet. And now many young adults, people my age, especially a little bit older that have younger kids, are talking about how they can't imagine the idea of being in middle school and high school and using artificial intelligence. It's very interesting to think about, in my opinion, and I'm sure that the cycle of technological advances between generations is going to continue in the future. All that being said, thank you so much for joining me on this journey into researching Llama 3.3. I hope my peers and my findings on AI and its intersection with the humanities has motivated you to keep learning about this incredible new technology and to experiment responsibly. So subscribe to the channel, that way you'll be notified when new videos are posted, and thank you again.
Thank you for joining us for this episode with Emilia Cortale. Her demonstration of Llama on Plácido's La Flor de la Caña shows the promise and the limits of creative AI in humanistic work. On the plus side, access and scaffolding matter. A good prompt can surface structure, themes, and questions that lower the barrier to difficult texts and help students articulate interpretive hypotheses that they can test against the lines. But the humanities remind us that speed is not depth. Poems live inside histories of race, empire, labor, and desire. Those contexts aren't optional add-ons. They're the meaning. When Llama 3.3 proposes an interpretation, it's a starting point for an argument, not a verdict. Emilia also surfaced the model's blind spots, confusing similarly titled works, smoothing over dialect and regional registers, and skating past the politics under the romance. Those moments are gifts for critical data literacy. Who is visible in training data? Who is erased? And how do those distributions shape the default reading an LLM offers? That's where our classes connect literary study to decolonial critique and multilingual reality, asking students to check the model against primary texts, commentaries, and community knowledge. Ethically, two fronts require explicit pedagogy. First, environmental impact. The apparent cheapness of an answer hides energy and water costs, plus materials extracted for chips and infrastructure. Let's fold sustainability into our methods. Require students to log when AI genuinely helps, when it adds noise, and when a library database or scholarly edition is the greener, better path. Second, learning integrity. AI can support inquiry, but it can also invite shortcutting. Clear norms help. Document prompts and outputs. Use AI for brainstorming questions, counter readings, or outlines. Reserve students' final analysis and prose for their own voice. Assess interpretation quality over surface polish. Finally, authorship and authority stay at the center. Llama can imitate style, but it can't bear responsibility. Humanities classrooms are where students practice owning claims, citing evidence, and acknowledging uncertainty. If we keep AI inside that framework, it becomes a lively interlocutor, not a ghostwriter. Thank you to Emilia for a careful, candid exploration, and thanks to you for watching. If this was useful, please like, subscribe, and share how you're using and critiquing AI in your courses. Let's keep the conversation rigorous, transparent, and human-centered.
Scrolling through Plácido's lines on my screen, Llama 3.3 reads what poets have seen. La flor de la caña blooms in translation, while servers burn coal for this conversation. We're learning to question what we're taught by silicon minds that think but are not, between the human heart and the machine. There's wisdom in spaces yet unseen. Late nights and deadlines make cheating tempting. When ChatGPT offers what my brain is resisting, but guilt weighs heavy on my conscience now. I'm learning responsibility somehow. We're learning to question what we're taught by silicon minds that think but are not, between the human heart and the machine. There's wisdom in spaces yet unseen. Water cooling servers while the earth grows warm. The price of convenience in algorithmic form. But maybe